My first memory is not of a face, but of a smile, my mother's teeth, bright and pale in the cold glow of the moon. Long and perfect, glittering like little knives under the stars. I can't remember how old I was, only that I was very small, smaller even than the mossy roots that wound their way through our forest home. She would smile down at me, and I would feel safe and terrified, both at once. Those nights were endless and wild, nights when the wind sang through the pines and the world was nothing but trees, moonlight and her voice. She would tell me stories, never fairy tales, never anything gentle or easy. She told me the story of how I came to her. Not how I was born, but how I was taken. "My baby," she would whisper, her voice low and watery, as if she had a river inside her chest. "You came to me because I needed you. I stole you from a man. And I brought you here, into the heart of the woods. I always wanted to know more. Why did she steal me? Why me, and not some other lost child?" She would never tell me, not truly. "Because you are my baby," she'd say, stroking my cheek with fingers that were too long, too jointed, warm and cold at the same time. "My baby will never know the cruelties that haunt me." Sometimes I wondered what those cruelties were. Sometimes I still do. But in the forest we did not speak of such things. Mother was not like anyone I'd ever seen, before or since. She was a huntress, first and always, a streak of gray and white in the shadows, moving silent and sure. She could fell an elk with a leap, or slide into the lake without a ripple, coming back later with a silver fish clamped in her gleaming jaws. She had claws as black as night, and her hair was long and wild, streaked with leaves and twigs, sometimes alive with little bugs that crawled through it as if she were a piece of the forest herself. Her eyes glowed in the dark, sometimes yellow, sometimes green, always knowing, always watchful. She tried to teach me what she knew. She tried so very hard. She taught me how to stalk a rabbit, how to crawl, how to hold my breath, how to wait until the world was still. She showed me how to set a snare. Though my fingers fumbled the knots and my stomach churned at the thought of taking a life, she taught me how to live among the trees, how to sleep on high branches when the wolves sang in the hollow below, how to dig a den in the cold earth when the winds turned cruel and icy. But I was a poor student. My hands were too soft, my teeth too small, my bones too brittle and slow to bend and stretch like hers. Mother could twist her body into shapes that frightened me sometimes. She grew tall as a tree. Sometimes she crawled through the roots like a mole. Sometimes she slithered along the ground as a shadow. I tried and I failed, again and again. One night, after I'd tried to hunt and only succeeded in scaring everything away, I curled up and cried. I tried to hide my tears, pressing my face into the damp moss, but I knew she could hear me. We were never truly apart in those woods. She came to me in silence, and without a word she covered me in fresh green leaves. She lay beside me, curling her long body around mine, a protective barrier between me and the world. "I will feed you, always," she whispered, "because you are my baby." That was her answer for everything. As I grew, she stayed away longer and longer. She ranged through the woods, leaving me to practice what I'd learned, to try my luck at snaring rabbits and fishing the shallow creeks. I was never very good, but I learned to take little, to leave most things untouched. I never hunted the bigger animals, never took more than a single berry from any bush. When she returned, she would check my traps and inspect my hands for calluses. She would taste the air and know what I had eaten, what I had done. You are learning, she would say, though there was always a shadow in her eyes. Sometimes when the moon was full, she would tell me stories of her own childhood, a time before me when she lived among the trees and the moles and the shadows. Before you came, I was alone for many lifetimes, she told me one spring evening, the firelight painting her face in strange flickering lines. But when I heard your song, I knew I would never be alone again. I wanted to know more, always more. Why do you leave me? I asked one night, my voice sharp with the pain of abandonment. She smiled, her teeth shining. I will never leave you, my baby. When you think I have gone, you must be silent and listen. Listen for me, the way I listen for the trees and the animals in the stars. If you are silent and you are sincere, you will hear me. But I was angry. I was young and wild and filled with a restless pain. So when she left, I hurt the forest. I stripped the branches for bedding. I threw stones at the birds and the rabbits. I ate until I was sick, and then I ate more. One day, as summer blazed in the woods, I heard voices. Not her voice, not the voice of the forest, but voices like mine, high, shrill, strange. I crept close and saw them. 4 people, soft and pink, faces wide and round, clothed in heavy, foreign things. I stared at them, and they stared at me. For a moment, time stopped. Then one of them lifted something long and metal, a thing I did not understand. Suddenly the world was noise, a crack of thunder, pain burning my shoulder, my own cry mixing with the terror of the wood. I ran, the forest punishing me for my cruelty. Thorns, stones, branches clawed at me. The men chased, their feet stomping the life out of the ground, desperate. I called for my mother. She came, tearing through the trees, a creature of claws and fangs and tangled hair. She was more terrifying than anything I had ever known. She slaughtered the men for me. The forest filled with screams and blood, the silence breaking only when the last voice was gone. She turned to me, rage in her eyes. See what you have done, she roared, her voice shaking the trees. She shook me in her claws, her face wild with grief and anger. When you hurt the forest, you hurt me. I killed for you. Now more will come. Do you see? I nodded, sobbing, unable to speak. She opened her hand. Inside, 4 eyes and a raw, glistening heart. Are you of me, or are you of man? I am of you, mother, I whispered, though my voice shook. She made me eat the eyes, eat the heart. It was the hardest thing I have ever done. For days I was ill, feverish, lost in dreams of blood and roots. Mother's voice singing me through the darkness. When I woke, she was waiting, tired and sad. I must leave, she said. There are more men. I must protect you and the forest. I begged her to stay. I need you. I am nothing without you. But she shook her head. You are my baby. Babies must learn. By learning they grow. Before she left, she told me her truth. She had once been a woman, beautiful and wild, who loved the woods. But men were cruel. They caught her, jailed her, stole her freedom. When she was released, a guard took her, hurt her, tortured her, broke her, left her to die. She died with me inside her. He tried to destroy us both. But love is a song, she told me, and sometimes that song can bring you back. She reformed herself, found me, took me into the forest because I was her baby. When you are silent and sincere, she said, you will hear my song. Then she was gone. Alone, I tried to survive. Winter came, cold and sharp. I grew weak, ill, hollow with hunger and grief. At last, as I lay dying, I heard her. Her voice, low and rushing, filled my dreams. I am coming, because you are my baby. I awoke to her, broken and bleeding, but smiling. She lay with me as the end came for her, her voice softer than the wind. You are of me. You are my baby. I was found, brought among men, told mother was not my real mother. But I knew better. In time, my body changed. My teeth grew long and sharp, white and beautiful, just like hers. And now, when I am silent and sincere, I hear her song. I know what I am. I am of her. I am of the wild. And the forest is waiting, because I am her baby. Prepare yourself for another unsettling journey. Conversation with a stranger on the bus. Some evenings, when the world feels just a little too sharp and the city lights flicker with a tired kind of energy, I take the bus home instead of driving. There's something about that long ride through rain-polished streets, the hush of tired commuters pressed together yet all alone, the warmth of headphones pressed over your ears. It gives you a sort of anonymity, a chance to vanish inside yourself, at least for a little while. That night was one of those nights. I'd stayed late at the job site, cleaning up sawdust and the fine grit of drywall dust that never seems to leave your hands, no matter how many times you wash them. My boots, steel-toed, heavy but comfortable, felt like an extension of my legs, part of me after so many years on construction sites. The bus was almost empty, except for a handful of regulars. The guy in the paint-splattered overalls who always gets off by the stadium. The old woman with her canvas grocery bags, always humming a quiet tune. A young couple, pressed together, asleep on each other's shoulders. And me, drifting, half lost in music, and the muffled world of my own thoughts. I was dozing, chin tucked to my chest, when I felt a tap on my arm. A small, persistent touch, gentle but impossible to ignore. I opened my eyes, pulling off one earbud, and looked up. A man was sitting beside me, where I was sure no one had been a moment ago. He looked to be in his late 60s, maybe older. His face was a map of lines and stubble, his eyes watery but alert beneath bushy brows. A battered old cap perched atop his head, its bill stained with oil and age. He nodded at me, then at my boots. I said, "I like your boots," he repeated, a slow, gravelly voice. I blinked, glanced down at my feet, then back up. "Oh, thanks. They've served me pretty well." He smiled. The kind of smile you see in old photographs. Good boots. The kind that last. I had a bunch like that, back when I was young. A good working boot, you know? I nodded, feeling the awkwardness but not minding it. There was something familiar, almost comforting, about the old man, like a neighbor you'd forgotten you used to know. "I use them every day on the job," I said, and for some reason that felt like something important to admit. He leaned in a little closer. "Where's that at?" "Turner Construction," I replied, out of habit. "We're building the big tower up on East Avenue." He grinned, nodding. "Heard about it. They say it'll scrape the sky when it's done. We never built 'em that tall in my day." He settled back, crossing his arms. "I started out on sites like that. You know, family business. My papa ran it before me. Put me to work when I was just a kid. Couldn't have been more than 15. I let out a low whistle. That's a tough way to grow up. He shrugged. Tough, sure, but you learn the value of a hard day's work. It sticks with you. He smiled again. So, how do you like it? I shrugged, then found myself talking more than I meant to. It's honest work. Feels good. Most days. Some nights, though, he nodded, knowingly. The aches in your bones tell stories. But the boots, they tell their own kind. We sat in a comfortable silence, the bus rocking softly, headlights drifting across rain-slicked windows. Outside, neon signs flickered and faded. Shop fronts huddled together against the chill. The world felt distant, unreal. He broke the silence. Mind if I tell you something? I shook my head, intrigued, despite myself. You ever sneak into a construction site when you were a kid? Play in the skeleton of a house? I smiled, remembering muddy sneakers and scraped shins. Yeah, me and my friends before they put the drywall up. Before the paint. It always felt like an adventure. Like being in a castle. He laughed. A deep, scratchy sound. Exactly. We used to do that too. Back in the day, every new house on the block was a new playground. But the real fun started when you got older. When you understood what it meant to build something permanent. He leaned in, his voice lower now. Almost conspiratorial. Want to hear about the perks, son? I hesitated, then nodded. He grinned. You talk up a pretty girl. Tell her about the house you're building. You bring her there at night. Just the two of you. Feels like you're showing her a kingdom that's yours alone. Privacy, sure, but something more. He paused, his eyes flickering with something I couldn't name. There are things you can do in a house before it's a home. Things no one else will ever know about. A slow chill crept over me, but he pressed on. Afterward, you cover everything up, pour the cement, lay the flooring. Once the job's done, no one's the wiser. It's all buried memories, secrets, mistakes, gone for good. He looked out the window as the city slipped past. You ever find anything under a house back when you were a kid? Something that wasn't supposed to be there? I felt my heart stutter. I remembered vividly a summer afternoon, crawling under my front porch during a game of hide-and-seek, my hand closing on something cool and hard beneath the dirt, a boot, an old work boot, cracked and stained. We'd found more, over the years, tucked beneath houses, all along our street. Sometimes just boots, sometimes other things, wrapped in rags too filthy to touch. We never told our parents. He smiled at the look on my face, as if reading my thoughts. Boots like those, he said, pointing at my feet. The bus rolled to a stop. He stood, stretching with a quiet groan. He patted my shoulder, the pressure oddly gentle. Well, this is me, he said, stepping into the aisle. As he passed, he leaned close, whispering, "Take care of those boots. They remember where you've been, even when you don't." He walked off the bus and disappeared into the drizzle, his silhouette swallowed by city lights. I sat there for a long moment, staring at my boots, memories stirring in the dark. I remembered the dirt beneath my fingernails, the whisper of secrets left under houses, and the weight of something unspoken passing between me and the stranger. Outside, the city kept moving, oblivious, indifferent, eternal. And as the bus carried me home, I couldn't help but wonder about the stories we leave behind, and the secrets that sleep beneath our feet. Some conversations linger, long after the journey ends. Some memories come back, step by step, every time you tie your boots. The bunker, the woods out past my hometown, are older than memory. The trees leaning close in the dusk, the air always just a bit colder beneath their canopy. That's where the Vance family vanished, beyond the last gravel road, beyond the reach of search parties or summer storms, somewhere between the shadows and the world's edge. It starts with Dr. Daniel Vance, a man with a mind sharpened by numbers and dread. A man who once studied the world's slow ruin through the lens of fluid dynamics, who one day saw too much and walked away from the world of classrooms and city lights. They say he came to a troubling conclusion, a mathematical certainty that haunted him so badly he quit his job, sold everything, and vanished into the trees. His wife followed, young and infatuated, convinced by the weight of his certainty and the warmth of his love. Their family grew. A pack of children, years measured in laughter and plans and supplies carried through deep woods. They became legends in town. Eccentric, rich, intensely private, but friendly too. Stories about Daniel's wild requests, his schemes for secrecy, his sudden purchases that emptied hardware stores and freight companies. They built a bunker out there, cement and iron, years of labor, the world's worries buried deep under forest loam and pine needles. Sometimes the family came into town, all 7 of them, trailing mud and smiles. But then the pandemic swept in and they disappeared entirely. We thought nothing of it at first. They were preppers. Lockdown meant nothing to them. They were ready for it before the rest of us had even heard the word. But after months passed, rumors grew. Then, one night, a call, the sheriff's voice trembling, as he told us a child had called from the woods, whispering coordinates, crying. The police found the bunker sealed tight, the door fused by some malfunction of locks and circuits. It took them hours to cut inside. What they found wasn't what anyone expected. No bodies, no survivors, only silence and the sharp scent of rust and fear. Beds left unmade, food blackened with time, buckets stained and ringed with filth. Doors smashed, others barricaded. Mold and darkness clung to every corner. Makeshift quarantine signs, the aftermath of violence that no one could quite explain. The town asked questions. The police offered only what they had to, an outbreak, a tragedy, nothing for anyone else to fear. The Vance family, they said, had been lost to a waterborne contaminant. It wasn't infectious, just cruel. The bunker would be demolished. But there were no answers. No closure, no bodies to mourn. Most people forgot in time. I tried to, but you don't really forget things like that. Not when the woods are so close and the nights are so long. It wasn't until years later, on a spring morning washed in fog, that I found the bunker myself, almost by accident. Though I suppose some part of me had always wondered. Ripley, my old collie, had gone missing. A coward of a dog, frightened by thunder and shadows, but family all the same. I followed his trail into the pines, heart thudding as I caught sight of the bunker's door, still marked with faded police tape, the lock burned and battered, the concrete stained with the desperate marks of fingers clawing for escape. The door gaped, black as a starless sky, sucking the color out of the day. I shouldn't have gone in. Any sane person would have turned back, but love is stubborn, and grief is heavier than fear. Inside, the silence was total, the air so thick with rot and time that every breath felt stolen. My flashlight swept over words scrawled on the walls. Equations and plans at first, then devolving into ragged, frantic repetitions. 5 doors. 5. Not 6. 6. Didn't make it. Didn't make it. 6 doors. 6. At the end of the hall, paragraphs neat, deliberate, each crowned with a careful cross. Obituaries, written in Daniel's hand, one for each of his children and wife. I stood there for a long time, listening to the silence, until Ripley's wet paw prints faded beneath a steel trapdoor. I climbed down, into the heart of the earth. The living space was a museum of suffering. Folding beds, tables, all crowding close in the stale darkness. The air was heavy with the memory of bodies and loss. Plates still set on the table, food rotted to tar, chairs fitted with rails and grooves, restraints or supports for the dying. Stains everywhere, foul-smelling, coppery, impossible to ignore. Ass prints and handprints on the fabric. A child's shape curled in the photo position on the floor. There was a jigsaw puzzle, 4 chairs set out. Only one pile of pieces touched, the rest left alone. I thought of Daniel, alone, desperate to maintain normalcy, piecing together the world as it fell apart around him. Everywhere. Signs of violence, panic, grief, light bulbs, all collected into a box. A finger jammed into an empty socket in the ceiling. Some need to finish, to illuminate, to make sense of the dark. A television sputtered to life, static filling the bunker. On the screen, an infrared camera showed Daniel, gaunt and wild-eyed, talking to the camera while his family sat at the dinner table, propped up, unmoving, dead. He fussed over them, spoke to them, lived among them as if nothing had changed. In the blurry glow, their eyes flashed white, reflecting the camera's gaze. Their bodies, puppeted from chair to chair, left smears and stains everywhere. Daniel's voice was cracked and soft, an exhausted lullaby. Miranda was first. Something in the storage room. The door. The door. It was never on the blueprints. It leads somewhere else, I'm sure. It opens, sometimes. And when it does, we lost the lights. We lost the radios. Phones disappeared. Batteries drained. We weren't alone. Something was here, waiting for us. It didn't need a reason, just an opportunity. He trailed off, distracted by something off-camera. In the darkness, 2 eyes glowed. Miranda's head had turned, just barely, to watch it. My hands shook. I shone my light on the table, and saw the stains anew, patterns of movement of bodies moved and posed day after day. A family, kept together, kept close, unable to leave or rest. Daniel's last entry, the door radiates, kills from a distance. Sometimes I hear it breathing. Sometimes I hear footsteps behind it. I can't let it take me too. I won't. If anyone finds this, leave. I found tools in the workshop, heavy and cold in my hands. The machinery still hummed, low and endless. On a bench, a child's arm disassembled, cleaned and labeled. Another attempt to rebuild what was lost. Ripley pressed close, whimpering, as eyes blinked in the darkness. I ran. Bodies. Daniel, his wife, his children, shambled through the shadows, hollow and silent, their eyes shining in the dark. I fled down the stairs, deeper into the earth, past ruined storage, until I found the door Daniel had described. It was wrong, too tall, too wide, covered in wet moss and leaking oil that floated up the walls. Behind it I heard breathing, wet, greedy, slow. When it opened, I saw a tunnel of flesh ringed with teeth, a mouth in the earth waiting to swallow everything. Sound, memory, hope. Daniel was there, inches from my face, his eyes wild and pleading. "Get out," he hissed. The others knelt before the door, their heads bowed in worship or surrender. "The only thing we did wrong was being here," Daniel whispered. "It doesn't let us die. If it catches you, it won't let you go either." The darkness reached out, an impossible hand, fingers jointed too many times, nails wide and sharp as shovels. It gripped Daniel's head as a child picks an apple. He didn't scream. He only closed his eyes. I ran, Ripley pressed against my side, my body numb with terror. I heard the thing skittering behind me, hundreds of limbs, a chorus of claws against stone. I reached the ladder, forced the bolt, and climbed, the dark pressing up behind me like water from a broken dam. Outside, the forest was cold, the moonlight silver and thin, but something caught my ankle. A hand, pale and huge, pulling me back, inch by inch towards the black doorway. I dug at the earth, screamed, and finally, Ripley returned. He latched onto the thing's arm, and for a moment, its grip loosened. I scrambled free. We ran, me sobbing, Ripley shaking with every step. We didn't stop until the bunker was gone behind us, lost in the trees. I spent weeks in the hospital, fevered and coughing. The sheriff came to see me, asked quiet questions, eyes haunted by what he'd already guessed. I said nothing. Sometimes, in the deep hours before dawn, I hear the radio in my basement crackle to life, white noise hissing through the dark. And sometimes, if I listen close, I hear a man's voice, barely more than a whisper, repeating the same words again and again. "Let them go, let them go, let them go." Just when you think it's safe, stories like this surface. The homeless in my neighborhood don't just want change. There's a kind of silence in old neighborhoods, a hush that settles in after sunset, a feeling that things move beneath the surface, quiet as worms in the earth. 2 years ago, my wife Angie and I finally managed to buy a house. We weren't naive. The market was a minefield. Every offer blown away by corporations with deeper pockets than we'd ever have. We'd done everything right. Worked hard, paid our debts, played by the rules. And still, the city I grew up in slipped out from under us, street by street. But we found a place, at last, on the edge of things. A hulking colonial, with wood floors the color of strong coffee, ceiling plaster frosted into wedding cake curls. The basement was another story. Unfinished, more cave than room, strange spirals and faces scratched into the walls. The realtor called them kids' graffiti. She smiled, eager to move on. But I remember thinking, even then, that the shapes didn't look like anything a child would draw. Still, we told ourselves it was only a stepping stone. A year, maybe 2, to get our feet beneath us before moving again. We filled the rooms with boxes, met the neighbors, played little games to ease the fear. Was that a firework or a gunshot? Human or dog? Soon enough, we knew the answers. There was a homeless problem, the kind you don't see in glossy brochures, but the locals looked through them, as if they were made of glass. I tried to greet them, nodding as I passed. It seemed like the decent thing to do. For a while things felt normal, until the night I saw him. It was late. I stood at the sink, rinsing a bowl, listening to the wind scrabble at the backyard trees. The window above the sink turned into a mirror, after dark. my own reflection drifting ghost-like above the shadows outside. But there, just at the edge of sight, a shape that didn't belong. A tall, unmoving figure between the trees. A man, staring back at me. My heart beat a hard rhythm in my chest. The kind of fear that made my hands slip and shatter the bowl in the sink. "You okay in there, honey?" Angie's voice, distant, gentle. I lied. "Yeah, I'm just taking out the trash." But the trash stayed behind as I stepped into the backyard. Night air, pressed in close. Branches shaking warnings overhead. "Hello?" I called. No answer. He stood there, impossibly tall. His coat draping all the way to his ankles, a pale scar bright beneath his chin. Closer. He felt unreal. His eyes empty of need or malice. Just watching. "What do you want?" I managed, fighting the urge to step back. He held out a fist, uncurled it slowly, and in his palm, a pill capsule, empty, catching the porch light. "I don't have any drugs," I said, my voice trembling. He didn't react, just waited, his gaze unwavering. I reached out, almost without thinking, and took the pill from his palm. It was nothing, just an empty shell, its contents long gone. "What do you want from me?" I tried again. He opened his mouth. His tongue was gone, a severed stump in a ruined mouth. He mouthed something, wide-eyed, pleading or warning. I couldn't tell which. A chill ran through me, cold and deep as grave soil. "Please, just go," I whispered. He stepped back into the trees, branches bending away from him as if they too knew better than to stand in his path. The next morning I couldn't let it go. I walked the neighborhood, asking after the tall man in the long black coat. The homeless turned away, eyes on the ground. No one would talk. Finally, at the edge of a driveway, two men tinkered with a car, laughing at my description until I mentioned the scars. "That's tall Frank," one said, face growing serious. "He's a can man, makes his living that way." I nodded, but the other shook his head. "You see him in your recycling?" "No, he was in my backyard, staring, trying to talk." Both men grew quiet. "He doesn't talk to anyone," the first said softly. "He cut his own throat. At least, that's the story." The other shrugged. "People tell all kinds of stories. Some say he lost his tongue to a dog. Others say it was something worse." I asked how he got his name. "My mama used to say, 'Watch your tongue, or tall Frank'll take it.'" He grinned, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. "What did he want with you?" "I don't know," I admitted, and neither did they. Days passed. I tried to forget, but a creeping sickness took hold. Headaches, heart pounding at night, dreams of dark figures in the yard, standing, always waiting. Angie worked late. I spent hours at the kitchen window, waiting for movement in the brush. One night, I saw him again. Tall Frank, rooted in the dark, coat swirling in the wind. I ran into the yard, fear mixing with a strange, stubborn anger. "What do you want from me?" I called. He turned, gesturing for me to follow. Barefoot, half asleep, I chased him through the yard and into the alley. He sat on a crumbling wall, his silhouette as thin and fragile as the moon. He motioned for me to sit. I refused, my voice shaking. But he reached into his coat and pulled out 2 envelopes. He offered them, his arms stretching almost impossibly far. I took them, hands trembling. One envelope contained a smeared letter, ink running, but still legible. When I finished reading, I stared at Frank in disbelief. Angie had a lover. The second envelope was worse. An insurance policy, my name on it. $250,000. I sat beside tall Frank, my mind racing. The pill, I realized, remembering the empty capsule. My emergency inhaler. A quick search confirmed it. Overdose started with headaches, palpitations. Angie was trying to kill me. Frank's arms settled around my shoulders, awkward, paternal, steady. We sat together in the silent alley, two strangers watching the upstairs window glow with light. There she was, Angie moving in the bedroom, stirring something into a mug. A minute later, the back door opened. "Honey, are you out here? I made you some tea." I didn't answer. Sometimes the homeless don't want change. Sometimes they just want you to see what's right in front of you. Now listen to this strange tale. A talking crow taught me to fly. There was a time when all the world I knew could fit inside a single small room. Stone walls, a rusty iron-barred window, and a chain that kept me tied to the narrow iron bed. At night, after my father's heavy footsteps faded away and the house grew silent as a tomb, I'd lie awake, tracing the cracks in the ceiling by the moonlight. I would listen for the softest sounds, the sigh of the wind, the hush of mice behind the walls, and as dawn crept in, the very first notes of birds outside my window. Birds, their voices were soft and wild and full of longing. I always imagined they were singing of places I would never see. Green forests, endless skies, far-off lands bathed in gold. Every note sounded like a story, and every story was about freedom. I used to dream about being a bird, to slip loose the chain around my ankle and soar above the trees, weightless, unseen, unafraid. Then one pale morning, something strange happened. I'd almost slept through the sunrise, but a sharp tapping at the window pulled me awake. Groggy and slow, I shuffled to the sill, dragging my chain with me. On the other side of the bars, a glossy black crow peered in, his eyes clever and shining. He rapped at the glass again. "Hello, Mr. Crow," I whispered, my voice barely there. He blinked, and then, in a voice dry as autumn leaves, he answered. "Hello, little girl." I stared. Was I dreaming? I'd heard crows mimic sounds before, but this was something else. You can talk," I stammered. He shrugged his wings. "All birds can talk," said the crow, "but not all humans know how to listen." I pressed my face to the cold glass, feeling the soft tickle of dawn on my cheeks. The crow cocked his head, regarding me through the bars. "Why are you in a cage?" he asked softly. I hesitated. Maybe it was the way he asked, or maybe it was because he was a bird and not a person. But I answered honestly, "I think it's my fate," I said quietly. "It's always been this way. Some people are just born into cages." He watched me for a long time. "You look hungry," he said at last. "Would you like something to eat?" My stomach ached with emptiness, but I hadn't dared to ask for more. "Yes," I said. "I would." The crow nodded and without another word, flapped away. He returned before I could blink away my tears, carrying a thin branch of figs. He poked them through the bars, and I ate greedily, sticky juice running down my chin. When I finished, the crow watched me, his head tilted in quiet amusement. "I didn't know they put children in cages," he said. "Do you think they mistook you for a bird?" I almost smiled despite myself. "No, Mr. Crow, they know what I am." So began a strange, secret friendship. Every morning, Crow visited me at the window. He brought figs, cherries, sometimes a shiny acorn or a crumpled leaf from a faraway tree. He told me stories of the sky, of how the wind felt beneath his wings, of how the world looked from above. He sang to me too in a rough, throaty voice that echoed around the room. I thought it was the most beautiful sound in the world. Through the long autumn, Miss Crow was my only visitor. I told him about the dreams I'd had, and he told me about storms and sunlight and the way the air smelled just before rain. But then winter came, and with it, a hush fell over the land. The fruit vanished from the trees, and Miss Crow's gifts grew scarcer. He seemed thinner, more tired. He would come late and leave early, his feathers dusted with frost. One bitter morning, as snow gathered in the corners of the windowsill, he asked me a question. "What would you do to leave this place?" he said, peering at me with one bright eye. I shivered, staring at my shackled ankle. "Anything," I whispered. "Anything at all." Mr. Crow nodded, grave and thoughtful. "The frost isn't the only thing that winter brings," he said. Then he spread his wings and vanished into the cold gray sky. 3 days passed. 3 days, with no sign of my friend, no flicker of black at the window, no soft tap to wake me. I felt a hollowness deep in my chest, an ache that made every hour longer and darker. On the fourth morning, as the world outside glistened with ice, a shadow fell across my room. It grew and deepened, swallowing the light, and then the sound began. Thousands of wings, a hurricane of crows, descended on the house. They battered the windows, tore at the roof, filled the air with shrieking, furious music. The walls shook, glass shattered. Through it all, I heard a single human scream, and then silence. A key slid under my door, glinting on the worn floorboards, hands trembling. I unlocked the shackle. It fell away, cold and heavy, and for the first time I stood free. Another key came. This one, for the door. I opened it, stepping into a house transformed. Splintered wood, broken glass, feathers scattered everywhere. And in the center of the room, a dark, crumpled shape. All that remained of my father. The birds were gone, save for one. Mr. Crow waited on the fireplace, black against the pale morning. "Now you can fly free, little girl," he said gently. "No more cages for you." Tears ran down my cheeks, hot and clean. "Will you come with me?" I asked. He shook his head, feathers ruffling softly. "My journey is ending. Yours is just beginning." He leapt into the air, circled once, and disappeared into the blue. I stepped out the door, feeling grass beneath my feet for the first time. The air was sharp and new. Above me the sky stretched on forever, limitless, silent, and full of birdsong. Some mornings when I wake to the first quiet notes of dawn, I remember that little room, the chain, the bars. I remember the crow who taught me to listen, and the feeling of my heart flying free, high above the world I left behind. And every day, I remind myself, no cage is forever. The sky is waiting. Let me share another unsettling tale. I'm a fire watcher. I found another fire watcher's unsettling journal at my new station. There are places in the world that eat at your memory. Places where the trees seem older than time, and the wind carries secrets that drift from mind to mind. Arrival. The station above the endless pines. I arrived at the tower just before dusk, The forest glowing gold and violet under the last edge of summer light. My boots crunched the gravel as I crossed the clearing, a suitcase in one hand and a satchel of blank notebooks in the other. Though I can't remember packing them. I suppose I must have. Arrived. Though that too feels like a half-remembered dream. The station loomed above the trees, perched on stilts 100 feet in the air, its wooden frame weathered by years of sun and silence. The wind here was always speaking. It whistled through the pine needles, carried distant smells, smoke, rain, the cold tang of mountain stone. The air felt sharper somehow, like waking from a long sleep and stepping into someone else's life. Inside, the tower was all glass and shadows. A bunk bed tucked under the window. A battered stove. A heavy wooden desk littered with yellowed paper. On the desk, as if left out for me, sat a stack of old typewritten pages. A note on top, written in faded pen. If you're reading this, I'm sorry. Keep watch at night. Don't go down if the stairs creak. Lock the trapdoor after dark. My hands trembled as I picked up the first page, the evening settling in around me, pressing against the glass. I sat at the desk and began to read. 2. A whisper from the past. The journal was dated 1989. I've been here 185 days, or so my calendar says. Supposed to be gone by now. Helicopter was due 5 days ago. Food's holding. Water's holding. Main radio's dead. The days are blurring together. The writing had a slow, measured rhythm. The kind that comes from too much solitude and not enough hope. He wrote of 2 others. Clark, young and anxious, and Thomas, older, gruff, always making rough jokes to hide whatever haunted him. They bunked together in the tower, watching for smoke. Below them, at the base of the stairs, Thomas kept to a smaller cabin, an office, though it was little more than a room with a typewriter and a single window staring into the forest's endless mouth. Some days are bright and clean. Others you wake up in the mist so thick you'd swear the sun never rose at all. I paused at that line. The sky outside my window was fading to charcoal blue. For a moment, I listened to the hush of the trees, the hush of my own breath. Had I always wanted to be here? Had I always dreamed of this silence? It was hard to say. 3. Smoke on the horizon. The journal's rhythm shifted on day 185. Clark woke me early. There's smoke out past the ridge, a thin sliver, curling up in the morning sun. First sign in weeks. Clark won't leave the tower. Says he's scared. He'll miss the rescue. I think he's scared of something else. He wrote about the shape of the woods, how the forest seemed to watch you even in daylight. They sent Thomas to check the smoke. His voice came over the walkie, thick with sleep and sarcasm. After I finish wiping my ass, I'll be on my way. Unless you want to help, Clarky. The narrator, Teddy, maybe, though he never signed his name, described Clark's fear, the way his hands shook, the way his eyes always flicked toward the tree line at dusk. You only come out here for one of 2 reasons. You want to get away from something, or you want to find out what happens to a man in silence. Outside my own window, a thin fog was creeping up the mountain. I shivered, drawing my blanket tighter around my shoulders. 4 nights that never end. The pages grew more scattered as the days wore on. Thomas did not return. The smoke faded, and the woods swallowed him. At night, Clark grew more agitated. He'd pace the floor, flicking through every channel on the walkie, searching for a human voice, any voice. But the only answer was static. A faint hiss that sounded, sometimes, like someone whispering behind the wall. They slept in shifts, or tried to. The night stretched so long that sleep became a kind of uneasy drift, haunted by the sound of footsteps on the stairs. Clark says, Thomas comes up the stairs after dark, says he stands by the door and just looks at us. I try to laugh it off, but I hear it too. The creak of wood, the hush when the wind dies, the feeling of someone standing just out of sight. I watch the shadows. I watch the trees. Sometimes I wonder if the trees watch back. In my own tower, I found myself glancing at the trapdoor by the stairs, as if expecting it to lift, slow and silent, in the blue half-light before dawn. Fractured memories one night. Clark stopped the narrator's chair as it spun, his face pale in the lantern glow. Listen, I don't remember coming out here. Do you? Do you remember applying for this job or being flown in? I can remember my last day of class, and then I was just here. The narrator froze, searching his own memory, but there was only mist, nothing before the tower, nothing before the endless woods. I try to remember home. I try to remember a face, a name, a reason, but all I remember is waking up here. The trees swallowing the horizon. Clark pressed his hands over his ears. Sometimes I dream of walking down the stairs, but the ground never gets closer. I just keep walking, and the woods keep getting darker. The narrator tried to comfort him, but the words felt hollow. The sense of unreality pressed tighter with each passing day. The longer we stay, the less we remember. The less we remember, the less we care. 6. The forest watches. The journal shifted again. The handwriting, growing jagged. Nights are worse now. The radio is dead. The food tastes like dust. I saw someone outside last night. Could have sworn it was Thomas. Could have sworn it was me. Sometimes I hear the trees breathing. Sometimes I think I can hear them whispering names. Names I used to know. There were notes in the margins, scratched diagrams, dates crossed out, calendars with days marked over and over again. In the stillness, the woods pressed closer, filling the windows with shadows and the mind with old fears. 7. More pages, new arrivals. The last pages were brief, but filled with dread. Day 192, 193. I found more pages, but they're out of order. Clark barely speaks. I haven't slept in days. Someone or something is on the stairs at night. Sometimes I hear my own voice calling out. From far away, I keep watching the forest. I don't remember why. The final entry was dated the day before I arrived. Tonight I met Gary and Harold. We're stationed here for the next 180 days. They seem familiar. I wonder if I should tell them what I've found. Or if I should tell them I don't remember coming here at all. I put the last page down and looked out at the endless black woods. The trees moved like a slow tide, dark and endless, the wind humming in their branches. In the reflection of the glass, I saw my own face, pale, eyes wide as if I had just woken up from a dream I couldn't quite remember. Behind me, the trapdoor creaked softly. 8. Now the forest is awake. Some nights, when the wind is just right, I hear footsteps on the stairs. I hear the radio crackle, faint and distant, as if someone is trying to speak through layers of time. The trees outside seem to draw closer, their branches scratching at the glass, tracing circles in the condensation. And sometimes, late at night, I think I see someone out by the edge of the clearing. A man tall and still, staring up at the tower. Or maybe at his own reflection in the glass. Maybe it's Thomas. Maybe it's Clark. Maybe it's me. 9. Soft ending. The watch never ends. If you find yourself alone in the woods, high above the ground with only the wind and the trees for company, remember, some places eat at your memory, piece by piece, until you are just another shadow at the edge of the firelight. Keep your door locked after dark. Keep your eyes on the horizon. And if you ever find a stack of old pages on a desk, read them quietly. Don't try to remember how you arrived. Just keep watch. Nightfall. Alone with the pines. Night comes early in the tower. By 8 p.m., the trees are already shadows layered on shadows. The world narrows to the little island of light inside the glass walls, and the low, slow hum of the wind outside. I light the lanterns one by one. Their glow is buttery and soft, casting gold into the corners, leaving the center of the room bright. But the glass always reflects the darkness, doubling it back into the cabin. Every sound is amplified. The tick of the stove, the creak of timber, the sigh of the window frame swelling and shrinking with the cold. Even the shuffle of my own footsteps sounds strange, like someone pacing just behind me. Sometimes I talk to myself just to break the quiet, but the words seem to vanish in the air. So I stop. I keep the journal on my lap, reading the old entries over and over, searching for something. A clue, a warning, maybe just a memory, but the words blur and drift, as if the pages themselves have started to forget. 11. Dreams that aren't dreams. When I doze, the dreams are vivid. In one, I'm walking down the winding staircase, down, past the office, past the last wooden step into cold dirt and roots. Each turn of the stairs seems to take me farther from myself, until the tower above is just a point of light, and the forest is everywhere. I hear Clark calling for me, but his voice is thin, watery, as if he's speaking underwater. Sometimes I dream of the forest itself. The trees lean closer, branches brushing the tower, tapping on the glass. I see faces in the wood, pale eyes, open mouths, and sometimes pressed to the window, a reflection that isn't mine. In the dream I always wake up, but when I do, the world seems wrong in small ways. The bunk on the other side of the room is unmade. The trapdoor to the stairs is unlocked. The desk lamp is burning, though I never switched it on. I write these things down in my own notebook, but by morning the details fade, leaving only the feeling of having been watched. 12. The woods speak softly. One night, as I sat watching the treetops ripple in the wind, I heard the faintest sound, not the sigh of the pines or the faraway howl of a coyote, but a low, rhythmic tapping. At first I thought it was the pipes in the old stove, but as I listened, I realized it came from the stairs below. A slow, patient step, creak, creak, creak. It paused at the landing, just out of sight. I held my breath, the lamp burning too brightly on the desk. The tapping continued, sometimes up, sometimes down, but never reaching the top, never opening the trapdoor. I waited, heart in my throat, but nothing happened, just the slow return of silence, as if the tower itself was holding its breath. After a time, I forced myself to get up and check the door. It was locked tight as I'd left it. No one there, just the echo of footsteps in the wood. I stood for a long time at the window, looking out at the forest, half hoping to see a lantern moving through the trees. A sign of Thomas, or Clark, or some forgotten memory. But the woods were empty, and the darkness pressed in. The new watcher's morning brought fog so thick I could barely see past the railing. I stood outside, the chill biting at my skin, listening to the slow drip of water off the eaves. That day, 2 figures arrived, trudging up the gravel path with packs slung over their shoulders. Gary and Harold, their faces were friendly, open. But there was a distant look in their eyes, the same lost uncertainty I'd seen in my own reflection. I greeted them, my voice soft, careful, but I didn't mention the journal, or the dreams, or the way the nights seemed to last forever up here. They unpacked their things, settling in as if they'd done this 100 times, as if they too had woken up, with only the vaguest idea of how they'd gotten here. That night, as the fog rolled in, I sat at the desk, the old pages spread out before me, listening to the new arrivals talk quietly over mugs of tea. I watched their faces, wondering if they'd remember this place after they'd left, or if, like Clark and Thomas and all the others, they'd be swallowed by the silence and the trees. For a whispered truth. If you ever find yourself alone at the top of a tower, high above a forest that never ends, with only a stack of old pages and your own reflection for company, be gentle with your memories. Keep them safe, because there are places in the world that feed on loneliness. Places where time folds in on itself, where the names and faces of those who came before you linger like mist in the trees. Lock the trapdoor after dark. Keep watch over the woods. And when the sun rises, write down what you remember, no matter how small, because some stories are only remembered in the telling, and some memories can only be kept by those who refuse to let them go. And when you dream, let the forest carry you gently, not into fear, but into the endless, soothing quiet, where the only sound is the wind through the pines and the soft, patient beating of your own heart. 15. A pattern of days. The days pass, soft and unmarked, like snow falling into a silent forest. In the morning, I sweep the floorboards, wipe the glass, watch the sun rise through the pines, a ribbon of gold lighting the world from the top down. Gary marks the weather in his little green logbook. Harold makes coffee, humming old songs under his breath. We exist in slow routine, moving through the hours like actors repeating a play we can't quite remember learning. I keep the old journal close, reading it by lamplight, tracing the faded letters with my finger. Sometimes the words seem to shift on the page, rearranging themselves in the glow of the lantern. We are all just shadows cast by fires that have long gone out. Sometimes, when Gary and Harold aren't looking, I open the trapdoor and peer down the dark stairwell, half expecting to see Thomas, or someone else, standing there, waiting. But there is only the slow, echoing silence of the tower. 16. Whispers in the pines. One night I wake to the wind tapping at the glass. The woods are alive with sound, not just the sigh of the breeze, but the gentle, persistent whisper of pine needles, the hush of branches swaying against one another. For a moment, I think I hear voices, just beyond the edge of the clearing, soft, indistinct, like a memory almost remembered. I sit up in bed, holding my breath, listening. I can't make out the words, but the tone is soothing. A lullaby for lost souls. I close my eyes and let it wash over me. The sound of the forest settling, of the night folding in on itself. 7. A visitor at midnight later. As the clock strikes 12, I see a pale shape moving at the base of the tower. It's not Gary, nor Harold. They are both asleep, their breaths slow and deep. The figure stands motionless, looking up at the light in my window. I can't make out a face, just the outline of a body, shadowed by the long arms of the trees. I feel no fear, only curiosity, a gentle pull, like a tide. I step onto the balcony, the cold night air wrapping around me. "Hello?" I whisper, but my voice barely carries. The figure doesn't answer. It only raises an arm as if in greeting or warning. I blink, and it is gone. Vanished into the trees. 8. The lost pages. One morning, I find more journal pages tucked under my pillow. The paper is old, edges curled, words faded by time and damp. I read them slowly, savoring each sentence. There is something in the woods that remembers. It knows our names, even when we have forgotten them. At night it walks the paths we made. It hums the songs we hummed. It watches the tower with patient eyes. I shiver, but not from cold. I feel seen, not in a threatening way, but as if something gentle and ancient is bearing witness. I fold the pages, place them in the drawer beside my bed, and wonder what other secrets the tower still holds. 19. The telling of stories. Gary and Harold and I begin to tell stories in the evenings. At first we stick to old favorites. Ghost tales, family legends, the small mysteries of our lives. But soon, the stories become stranger, more dreamlike. Gary tells of a night he walked through fog so thick. He lost his way and found himself at the edge of a lake that wasn't on any map. Harold remembers a childhood friend who vanished one summer evening, leaving only footprints in the dew. I listen, adding my own memories, or maybe just dreams, of towers that move in the night, of forests that shift and rearrange themselves. The stories linger in the air, winding around us like smoke. 20. A letter to myself. One quiet afternoon, I find a letter tucked into the old journal. The handwriting is familiar, but older, shakier. It's addressed to me. If you are reading this, it means you are still here. Remember to breathe. Remember to look out the window, to listen to the wind, to watch the way the light moves through the trees. You are not alone, even when you feel you are. This place keeps its own kind of time, its own kind of memory. Hold on to yourself. Hold on to the story. 21. The storm. One night, a storm sweeps through the valley. Lightning flashes, thunder rumbles. The trees bend and sway like dancers in a fever dream. Rain drums against the glass, so loud it drowns out even my thoughts. I sit at the desk, lantern burning low, watching the sky break open. Gary and Harold huddle in their bunks, whispering softly. In the flashes of lightning, I see shapes moving through the woods, shadows that flicker and fade, always just at the edge of sight. I tell myself they are only trees, only wind, but I can't quite believe it. 22. A dream of rescue. In my dreams, I hear a helicopter overhead. The slow, heavy chop of its blades. I run to the balcony, wave my arms, shout for help. But the sky is empty. The sound recedes into silence. I wake with tears on my face, the ache of longing heavy in my chest. Gary says nothing, but I see the same look in his eyes. We are waiting for something, or someone, but I am no longer sure who or what. 23. The endless forest. Some nights, the forest seems to grow closer. Branches scraping against the glass, pine needles swirling on the wind. The woods are deep, older than memory, full of secrets. Sometimes, I think I see faces among the trees, watching, waiting. But when I blink, they are gone. 24. A gentle surrender. As the weeks drift by, I feel myself softening, like wood exposed to sun and rain. The fear ebbs, replaced by a strange, peaceful acceptance. I sit on the balcony at dusk, listening to the chorus of crickets, the soft rush of wind through the branches. Above me, stars wheel slowly in the sky. I let myself imagine that I am part of something larger, some ancient rhythm, and for a while I am content. 25. The last page. The old journal is nearly finished. On the final page, a single sentence, typed in a hand that is not mine. When you leave, remember to close the door behind you. I smile, close the cover, and place the journal back on the desk. Night falls, soft and slow. The tower is quiet, the forest is calm, and somewhere, far below, a new fire watcher will arrive, will find these pages, will read these words. The story will go on, like the turning of the seasons, the rising of the sun. 26. A whisper to sleep. So now, as you lie in bed, listening to the wind outside your window, let your mind drift like smoke above the trees. You are safe. You are watched over. You are not alone. The forest holds your secrets. The tower keeps your dreams. And when morning comes, you will wake, refreshed and unafraid, ready to greet the light. Good night, and may you sleep as softly as the mist that blankets the woods at dawn. Sleep fade out for the last 10 minutes. The tower is quiet now. The woods below are dark and calm. You can hear the wind, soft and low, like the breath of the earth itself. Maybe you'll dream of the forest tonight, of pine needles underfoot, of stars glimmering through the trees, of a voice calling from a distant ridge. But you don't have to answer. Not now. You can let go. The journal on the desk will be waiting, should you want to read it again. The fire watcher's tower stands watch, silent and steady, holding the night safe until dawn returns. The story isn't really over. It just drifts into dreams, waiting for the next watcher, the next page, the next sunrise. You are safe. You are held. Let the mystery rest a while, and let yourself rest too. Good night. Listen closely to this quiet nightmare. I met a demon on the Tokyo subway. Some memories blur at the edges until you start to wonder if they ever truly belong to you. There are nights I lie awake, tracing the patterns of city lights on my ceiling, and I find myself thinking of Tokyo's tunnels, of flickering fluorescent bulbs, the distant thunder of trains, and something impossible I once saw in the spaces between. I was only a child then, but part of me has never left that underground world, where the line between dream and reality grows thin, and sometimes the shadows speak. The drifting. I was 7 years old, the summer my father took me to visit Tokyo. It was a city that buzzed with energy at all hours, a living river of faces, voices, neon signs, and the strange hush of midnight trains. I remember the feel of his hand, warm and steady, wrapped around mine as we moved through the station's bright, echoing corridors. Everything felt larger than life down there. The tiled walls, the endless tracks, the way people moved with silent purpose, their eyes never quite meeting yours. I think I was dreaming of trains even before I saw him. We were waiting for the next subway, my father humming softly beside me, watching the arrival boards, when I first noticed the figure. He stood apart from the crowd, impossibly tall, shrouded in a thick gray coat with fur bristling along his shoulders. At first, I thought he was just another tired commuter. But the longer I stared, the less he resembled anyone at all. His eyes were the color of old coins, dull and distant, glimmering with a secret sadness. A snout, long and narrow, jutted from his face, curving down like an anteater's, and from his back, folded tight, were wings. Not feathers, but something leathery and ancient, whispering softly in the subway's stale breeze. I couldn't look away. My father squeezed my hand, but I barely felt it. The stranger in the shadows. Minutes might have passed, or maybe only seconds, but the world felt suspended. The voices around us faded into echoes. The colors seemed to bleed, and all I could see was the demon at the far end of the platform, glancing nervously in my direction. He muttered something to himself, low and uncertain, a voice meant only for the shadows. This human is creeping me out. It almost looks like it's looking right at me. His words slid between the rumble of trains, so soft I thought I'd imagined them. But I hadn't. I spoke up, surprising even myself. I am looking right at you. The demon flinched. His wings shivered, folding tighter. You can see me, he asked, almost in a whisper. Yeah, can't everybody? I asked. He shook his head, bristling with disbelief. Not unless they're in the fifth dimension. Am I in the fifth dimension? I wondered aloud, blinking sleepily. He peered at me, thoughtful. Your mind must have slipped over here by mistake. What were you thinking about before you saw me? I thought back, a sleepy grin tugging at my mouth. Trains, I said. He let out a quiet, wheezing laugh. Trains are the link between our worlds, you know. Your mind must have wandered through a door most people never even see. He studied me for a moment, then added, either that, or you're going crazy. I shrugged, too young to care. I hope I'm not going crazy. In the fifth dimension, being crazy is a good thing, he replied, his eyes twinkling. For a moment, I forgot to be afraid. The world felt smaller, the shadows less heavy. I watched him fidget with his wings, glancing at the arriving train as if he was late for work. Conversations with the impossible. Do you have subway lines in the fifth dimension? I asked, curious. Of course, he said, as if it were obvious. How else would we get anywhere? My wings are for rainy days, not for flying to work. He stretched out one of his wings, leathery and vast, and draped it over his head like an umbrella. The motion stirred the air, sending a soft rush of wind across the platform. I giggled, enchanted. You're funny, I told him. He seemed surprised by this, and for a moment, the sadness in his eyes faded. Most humans run from me, he murmured. Or they never see me at all. I felt a sudden wave of sympathy, the kind only children feel, as pure and bright as sunlight. It must be lonely. He looked away, then back at me, his expression unreadable. Sometimes I meet someone who can see, really see. That's rare, special. He paused, thoughtful. Would you like to see a magic trick? He asked. I nodded eagerly. He reached up and began to pull a rainbow handkerchief from his snout. It kept coming, foot after foot. Red, blue, green, yellow. 20 feet of color streaming out, until it tumbled to the floor and vanished into thin air. I laughed, and for a moment, the station felt less empty. The world slipped sideways, but when I looked up again, my father's hand was gone. The crowds of commuters had disappeared, the hum of the subway replaced by a soft green hush. I stood in a field of swaying grass, old train cars rusting quietly in the sunlight. The air smelled of rain and wildflowers, and the only sound was the gentle creak of metal as the wind rocked the abandoned carriages. I spun in place, dizzy and afraid. I can't see the subway station anymore, I whispered. That's all right, the demon said, stepping beside me. Sometimes it's better to see what isn't there, instead of what is. His words echoed in the soft breeze. What do you mean? I asked. He looked at me, thoughtful. Sometimes when I'm lonely, my mind slips off to the third dimension, and I see people like you. Places like this. We walked together through the meadow, our footsteps silent on the damp earth. Can you go to other dimensions too? I asked. He didn't answer at first. Instead, he stared up at the sky, his wings folding and unfolding restlessly. It's starting to rain, he murmured, spreading his wings over his head. Warm drops began to fall, gentle and slow. Can I get under your wings too? I asked, suddenly feeling small. He shook his head, sorrow in his voice. Not now. You've got to go home. The world shimmered, colors bleeding together, green into gold, gold into gray, spinning faster and faster, until I had to close my eyes. I felt a soft, comforting hand guiding me, steady and safe. And when I opened my eyes again, I was lying on cold tiles, the harsh lights of the station flickering overhead. The return my mother was kneeling over me, her eyes red with tears. Where's Dad? I asked her, confused. Did he bring me home? Yes, darling, she said softly, not quite meeting my eyes. He brought you home, and then he had to go away. I wanted to ask more, but my mind felt heavy, the memory of the meadow already fading, like a dream before dawn. What remains my father never did come back. Years later, I learned the truth. The story adults tell when they think you're old enough to understand. That day, he had written a note to my mother, a note full of sorrow and apology. He had intended to bring me with him, to step in front of the train, to let the darkness take us both. The police said I pulled away at the last moment, fainting as I ran. But a witness, a boy about my age, said something else. He said he saw a tall, furry figure with leathery black wings and an anteater's snout take my hand and lead me away from the tracks. No one believed him. Not really. But I remember that field of green, the gentle rain, the warmth beneath impossible wings. Sometimes on quiet nights, I hear the distant rush of subway trains, and I wonder if the demon still rides the rails, slipping between worlds, watching over lost children. If you ever find yourself in a silent station, half asleep and dreaming of impossible things, listen for a whisper in the shadows. Sometimes kindness wears the strangest face of all. Fade out into soft, repeating outro lines, slow and gentle. The trains run on beneath the city, shadows flicker in the fluorescent light. You are safe, and the story drifts away, gentle as a summer rain. Sleep now, and let your mind wander. There are worlds within worlds, and tonight, you are watched over. Now let's wander into another strange experience. A shattered life. It started like any other walk. The sun filtered through the trees just right, the air still and expectant. I followed the trail like I always did, the earth soft under my boots. But something felt strange, like the woods were watching, holding its breath. And then, the world unraveled. I don't know exactly how to describe what came for me that afternoon. It wasn't a shadow or a blur or even a presence. It was an absence. Where it appeared, the trees simply weren't. Where it moved, the breeze died. Even the grass had ceased to be. I stood frozen as it leapt toward me. There was no sound, no rush of air, just the nothingness breaking into me like a cold, sharp claw piercing through a part of myself I didn't know existed. And yet, I wasn't bleeding. My arms, my chest, my skin, they were intact. But something deeper, something unseen, had been torn. I ran back through the woods, stumbling in panic, heart pounding. But even as I reached the safety of home, I knew I was less than I had been. Something had been taken. At first it was easy to ignore. A warm mug of coffee dulled the strange fog in my mind. The tiredness, the drifting thoughts, they faded under caffeine's familiar buzz. I convinced myself it had been nothing. Just exhaustion, stress, a trick of the forest. Then I met Mar. She was sunlight in the fog, bright laughter, soft hands, warmth I hadn't felt in years, and as impossible as it sounds, I fell in love with her before we ever met in person. Her voice over the phone wrapped around me like a blanket, grounding me. But with that joy came a ripple. The entity stirred again. The changes were small at first. My neighbor's car changed color overnight from navy blue to pitch black. At work, a man I'd known for years, his name shifted from Fred to Dan. Everyone swore it had always been Dan. I shook my head, told myself I was remembering wrong. Then it got worse. I was in my bathroom, brushing my teeth, half drowsy, and then I was standing in the middle of a street, still in my pajamas, still mid-motion. A dozen strangers stared in horror. As I blinked against daylight, I ran. Somehow, I made it home, but I couldn't deny it anymore. Something was wrong with me. That night, Mar arrived, but with a key. "How'd you get a key?" I asked, heart racing. She laughed, brushing past me. "You're cute," she said. "Are you sure you're okay with this?" Moving in is a big step after 3 months. 3 months? We'd only just met. But I smiled, nodded, said all the right things. My mother always said I was a smart cookie. I knew when to keep quiet. In my room, I checked everything. My journals, my drawers, my phone logs. They all said the same thing. I had lost 3 months. The entity hadn't disappeared. It was feeding quietly, eating my life piece by piece. From then on, I lived with vigilance. No alcohol, coffee every morning. I checked the calendar like a man checks the pulse of a dying patient. For 3 years, I managed drifting, noticing only tiny changes. A name here, a TV channel number there, a building slightly taller than before. I never zoned out. I never relaxed. Until one night, I did. It was the finale of my favorite show. God, it was good. I got pulled in for once, fully present in the story. And then a boy tugged my sleeve. "Who are you?" I asked, startled. He laughed. "Silly daddy." I stared. My heart sank. He was mine, my son, 2 years old. I had missed everything. Mar entered the room minutes later, holding a plate of cookies, smiling like this was normal. We were married. We had a child. And I had never seen it happen. That night, I sat by the window with my son in my arms. Outside, snow began to fall. It was the only thing that made sense anymore. I sought help. The church called it a spiritual crisis. The doctors ran scans and shrugged. They all told me I was fine. I wasn't. Finally, I decided to tell Mar everything. But when she knocked at the door that night, her eyes sparkled with first-date nerves. Her dress was new, her smile hopeful. "I didn't expect such a fancy dinner on our second date," she teased. Second date. God help me. I played along. I asked questions. I studied her like I was falling in love for the first time. Because from her point of view, and over time, I learned to live inside the cracks. Each time I jumped, I stayed silent. I watched. I listened. Sometimes I'd wake up beside Mar on our honeymoon. Other times I was a father helping with homework. Once I met my 6-year-old grandson before I ever saw my own child born. My life wasn't a line anymore. It was a shattered mirror. But I was always there, eventually. And when I got to relive those early moments with Mar, moments I'd missed, I understood the gift buried inside the curse. She looked at me once while unpacking boxes and whispered, "It's like you've loved me for a lifetime." She wasn't wrong, but it didn't last. The gaps began to close in. Weeks became days. Days became hours. I feared the worst. That one day, I'd live only in moments. A flicker in time. Never enough to hold a thought. Never enough to say I love you. And then, I told my grandson. He was a teenager by then. He listened. Really listened. "We need data," he said. "You should write everything down. Track your jumps. Find the pattern." So I did. Every spare second, I scribbled notes. I stored them under the stairs out of order, fragmented. My first box was the 30th. My last box was the first. One day, in the future, or the past, I couldn't tell, he opened that box. "Holy crap," he whispered. "There are dozens of them." I blinked. "I wrote all of those." "Not yet," he said. "But you will." And for the first time in years, I felt hope ending. I remember the snow. It fell like it always had. Quiet, slow, eternal. Then, he brought me to the machine. Wires, a chair, a mirror, taller than a man. My grandson, now grown. "We found it," he said. "We found it." The parasite. It had always been there, leeching reality from my mind. He turned on the current. The pain was indescribable. I saw the thing then, attached to me like a second skull. Its body was coiled in places I didn't know existed. And as it writhed, memories rushed back. Holding Mar's hand in childbirth. And then, holding her hand again in a sterile hospital room. She was gone. I broke. But in that agony, through the electricity and tears, I understood. I had lived every moment, even if not in order. And when the pain faded, I was back. Young, alone, in the woods. The creature approached again, but turned away. It couldn't feed anymore. I returned home, breathless. The phone rang. I stared at it, heart pounding. I already knew who it was. "Hey," I answered, tears in my voice. "Who's this?" Even though I already knew, it was her. And I had the chance to live it all again. This next tale is as mysterious as midnight. Space Girl. She was always drawing unicorns. Always off in a corner. Always alone. Head down, pencil moving. Lost in some world only she could see. Her name was Megan Daniels, but we called her Space Girl. And for a long time, none of us knew who she really was. Until the day she showed us. She never really fit in. Not in elementary school. Not even in middle school. With her pale skin, oversized glasses, and long red hair that always seemed tangled at the ends, she stood out in a way most kids didn't want. She didn't play with us. She didn't talk much. She'd sit by herself, hunched over a little notebook, drawing unicorns and castles and strange glowing forests. That's how she got the name Space Girl. Not because she liked space, but because she seemed to live in a different world entirely. We teased her. At first it was light, a joke here, a whisper there. But kids don't always stop at light. Sasha. She was the ringleader. Sharp-tongued, cruel. Always with a smirk behind her words. Tanya followed her like a shadow. I was somewhere in the middle. I never said much, but I laughed when they laughed. And I never stopped them. One rainy day in 5th grade, during indoor recess, Sasha took Space Girl's notebook. We all watched as she snatched it from her hands. "What even is this?" she scoffed. A unicorn? What are you, 5? She tossed the book to me. The drawing inside. It was actually beautiful. Bright, glowing colors. Intricate line work. But I didn't say that. I passed it along to Tanya, who crumpled a page and threw the book to the floor. Space Girl didn't say a word, just quietly picked it up again. But I remember the way her hands trembled. That day was the start of something uglier. Outside at recess, Space Girl always sat beneath the same tree, always drawing, and we, Sasha, Tanya, and I, always hovered, ready with a new insult. "Draw me next, Space Girl," Sasha mocked once. "Bet it'll look like I got hit by a bus." She never replied, never fought back. That only made it worse. By 7th grade, things had spiraled. Rumors started about her mom, about her house, about boys and shadows and things no one should have been talking about. A prank happened just before Christmas. Some boys shoved her under mistletoe with a boy named James. Someone took a picture. It was meant to be funny, but it wasn't. James lashed out. Hit her. They both got suspended. I saw her face that day. Tears, confusion, fear. I should have said something, but I didn't. After that, she vanished for a few weeks. And then, people started dying. The Jordan brothers, Mike and Brian, died in a car crash on Christmas Eve. James was found dead a few days later, out in the snow. Something about an animal attack. It didn't make sense. Not in our town. But I didn't think much of it. Not until I went to Sasha's house. She'd found Space Girl's notebook. "I figured she dropped it after the prank," she said. "So I kept it." She grinned as she opened it. And what I saw turned my stomach. Page after page. Drawings of Space Girl killing herself. Hanging, drowning, standing on rooftops. "Sasha, what the hell is this?" She just laughed. "It's just a joke. Who cares? It's Space Girl." I didn't say anything. I just took the notebook and ran. That night, I flipped through it alone. The pages she'd drawn, the real ones, were beautiful. Unicorns, mermaids, dreamscapes in gentle watercolors. But there was one drawing I remembered clearly. The unicorn prince. Back at Sasha's house, the figure had been missing. Just an empty field. Now, he was there. A tall unicorn with lines like ink and paper. Horns shining in the sky. I stared at it, unsure of what had changed, or why it felt like the drawing had completed itself. When school resumed, I gave the notebook back to Space Girl. I apologized, quietly, genuinely. She didn't say much, didn't thank me, didn't even look at me really. But she opened the notebook, and she started drawing in it again. And that felt like enough. Sasha didn't speak to me after that. Neither did Tanya. I was alone most of that year. Sometimes I'd catch Space Girl watching me. Never for long. Just a glance. Just a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. And once I found a poem she'd thrown out. It wasn't like her other work. It was angry, cold, a warning, hidden in rhyme. "There is a land where your sorry may go, a sickening land where it always snows." The last line read, "Take your apology and stuff it up your ass." I didn't blame her. I kept the poem, not as a reminder of her anger, but of my guilt. High school brought change. For some, Sasha was still Sasha, loud, popular, bitter. I kept to myself. And Space Girl, she stayed quiet, always sketching, always watching. I saw her more when we ended up in the same art class. She was in her element there. And when we had to pair up for a portrait project, I chose her. She didn't trust it at first, but eventually she smiled. And when she painted me, it was stunning. Flowers bloomed from my hair. I looked peaceful, dreamlike, loved. "It's beautiful," I whispered. She nodded. You can call me Space Girl if you want. The portrait was hung in the hallway. Only lasted a day. Sasha saw it and destroyed it. She splashed red paint across it, added words. Crude, hateful. I wanted to scream. Instead, I hit her. A tray to the face. Detention. Suspension. Rumors. They called me a dyke. Said I was dating Space Girl. I didn't care. But Space Girl. She looked smaller after that. Quieter. Then one night, Sasha cornered me in a park. Tanya was there too. There was a gas can in the portrait, soaked in gasoline. This ends now, Sasha sneered, matchbook in hand. But then, something impossible happened. Out of the shadows, it emerged, a unicorn, but not of flesh and bone. It looked drawn, lines and curves from a sketchbook come to life. It charged, fast, silent. Tanya tried to run. The horn pierced her like paper. She didn't scream long. And then, the portrait moved. From inside the painting, the version of me, Space Girl had created, graceful, serene, reached out and grabbed Sasha by the leg. She screamed, begged, but the painted version of me dragged her inside, piece by piece, until nothing remained. I never asked Space Girl about that night. I never asked how her drawings became real, or how they avenged her. I didn't want to know. The painting of Sasha still hangs in her studio, beside a painting of her father, eyes wide in terror. And sometimes I swear, I see the frames shiver, like something inside them still lives. It's been years since then. We live a quiet life now. My wife paints. I let her. Sometimes I catch her sketching late into the night. Sometimes I hear paper rustling, even when no pages are turning. But I don't interrupt. I never ask, because I've learned something important. You don't mess with Space Girl. Not anymore. And especially, not when she's drawing. Here's something that happened not so long ago. The man behind the window. It began with a whisper. The kind of night where the walls feel too quiet, the air too still, and the shadows outside the window seem to lean a little too close. That's when my son crawled into bed with me, tears on his cheeks, eyes wide with something older than fear. And he whispered, "Daddy, the man in the next house is making scary faces at me." We lived in a quiet part of Texas, just me and my kids. Alicia was 8, Jay was 4. Their mom had been out of the picture for years, not gone, just gone enough. But we were doing okay. A modest 2-bedroom, steady job, simple routines. Until the night Jay woke me. I asked him what kind of faces. He didn't answer right away, just clung to me, trembling. It didn't sound like one of his usual nightmares. Jay's always been prone to them. Monsters in the closet, shadows under the bed. But this time, it was specific. "The man next door," he said again. "He's watching." I followed him back to their room. Alicia was already awake on the top bunk, arms crossed. The soft nightlight threw pale gold over the room, catching the annoyance in her eyes. "I'm tired of this," she muttered. "He always cries. I never sleep." Jay whimpered beside me. I didn't turn on the lights, just parted the curtains by their window. From their room, you could see the left side of the neighbor's house. 2 windows faced ours, but both were dark. One was the kitchen, I remembered. The other always had its curtains drawn. "Alicia," I asked quietly, "did you see anything?" She shook her head, huffing. "Nope, just his crying again." Jay ended up camping in my room that night, tucked inside his little Ninja Turtle tent. I let it slide. Night 2, same setup. Night 3, though, Alicia woke me. And this time, her voice held something that chilled me. "Daddy, The neighbor was making faces at me. I sat up, fully awake. "Did you open the curtain?" "Just a little," she said. I heard a weird noise. She couldn't explain it. Not really. Something like clicking. She'd peeked outside and saw the neighbor's window open. For once, the back curtains were drawn wide. "He was standing there," she said, "right up against the glass." I asked what he was doing. She hesitated, then showed me. She smiled wide, teeth clenched, a strange gap between them. Her brows furrowed. Her head tilted too far. Then her arms moved. She held one forearm out, palm up, and with her other hand made sharp, violent swipes across it back and forth. "He was playing the violin," she whispered. But we both knew that wasn't a violin. I froze. My stomach twisted. "Did he do anything else?" I asked. She nodded, then slowly raised both hands and began beckoning. That motion, slow, inviting, was worse somehow than the rest. I told her to stop, tucked her into my bed. Then I sat in the dark for a long time, listening. The next morning, I dropped the kids off at school and knocked on the neighbor's door. His car was in the driveway. No answer. I knocked again, louder. Still nothing. As I turned to leave, I caught movement in the front window. A shadow ducked down fast. He was watching me. I shouted. Told him to stop messing with my kids. My voice echoed in the morning air. That night, I decided to stay in the kids' room. The curtains were cracked just slightly. I locked every door, sat beneath their window, waiting. Midnight came quietly. Then, sound. A soft clicking, like a tongue tapping the roof of a mouth. Chook, chook, then a breathy whistle. Not right. Like someone inhaling through broken teeth. It was close. I stood and pulled the curtain. And there he was, the neighbor lit by the faintest bulb behind him. That face, it was Alicia's face, mirrored on an older man, grinning, strained, inhumanly still. And his arms, outstretched, forearms clashing together in a twisted mimic of slicing motion, again and again. When he saw me, when he realized he wasn't looking at a child, his smile vanished. What replaced it wasn't fear, it was hatred. He slammed his window shut and tore the curtains closed. But that wasn't the end. Just as I turned from the glass, smack, a thunderous impact on the window. I pulled the curtain back again, hands shaking. No light now, just darkness, and a single handprint pressed against the top corner of the glass. Too high. Our windows are raised, 4 feet off the ground at least. That hand shouldn't be there. I dialed 911, whispered the situation to the operator, made my way around the house, locking everything again. My last stop was my bedroom. Jay and Alicia were asleep in their tent. I grabbed my handgun from the closet and waited. The minutes dragged, then movement at the window. A silhouette, still, watching. The moonlight made it clear. A man-shaped figure, just outside. And then, it moved. Arms raised high above his head, too high. I blinked, struggling to process what I was seeing. His arms stretched wide, unnaturally so, like they'd grown in the dark. Each one, as long as his entire body. Hands dangling at the ends, twitching. Fingers flopping like broken branches. He brought them down. Thud, thud, thud. Each hit against the glass felt like a question I didn't want answered. I stood, gun drawn, ready. Then, sirens. The figure turned, raised its arms one last time, and slammed them against the glass. And then, they were gone, like someone had drawn a line through his elbows. No blood, no sound, just vanishing. And he ran. The police arrived within moments. 2 officers entered the neighbor's home after calling out and finding the door unlocked. I watched from the kids' window, heart pounding. The house swallowed them in silence. When they emerged, their faces were pale. I stepped outside, voice shaking. "What did you find?" The female officer met my eyes. "Your neighbor's dead." That's all she said. I never learned more. Not really. Just that people kept coming. Detectives, suits, cleaners, photographers. They told me nothing. But I saw something I wasn't meant to. Outside my bedroom window, just before they shooed me away, 2 shapes on the ground. 2 arms, human, severed clean. We've been staying with my parents ever since. The apartment's too small, too loud, too full of memories, trying to stay quiet. But I can't go back. Not with Alicia waking in cold sweats. Not with Jay clinging to me at night. And not while that thing, whatever it was, is still out there. Outro, I still dream about the window sometimes. The soft white curtain, the silhouette behind the glass, the way those arms rose too long, too silent, beckoning, just beckoning. Now, hear about a night that changed everything. He's not watching. He's inside. When my sister died, it tore through our family like a cold wind through broken glass. We were never perfect. Who is? But after Lisa, everything splintered. Dad stopped speaking. Mom buried herself in fundraisers and flower drives. And I stayed angry, suspicious, like something was left unfinished. Lisa was light. The kind of person who smiled with her whole face, who made rooms warmer just by walking in. Her death, they said, was an accident. A fall on a quiet hiking trail. But grief has a way of sharpening your senses. And sometimes what you feel in your bones is louder than facts on paper. Lisa's boyfriend, ex-boyfriend, really, was named Matt. They dated for about a year. He was quiet, polite, too polite. Always lingering just a second too long. Always watching. Lisa used to laugh about it. Called him her stage 5 clinger. But the way she said it didn't feel like a joke. After the breakup, Matt didn't let go easily. There were texts, voicemails, flowers left at her desk at work. She brushed it off, said he'd get bored eventually. And maybe he would have. But then, she died. Lisa's funeral was quiet, small, private. Matt didn't show up. We thought that was the end of it. But a week later, on a gray Thursday afternoon, he returned. It was raining, one of those slow, steady rains that muffle the world. My mother opened the door, and there he was, standing in the cold with a bouquet of lilies. Lisa's favorite. "I just wanted to pay my respects," he said. She meant so much to me. He smiled softly, head tilted like he was trying to shrink into sorrow. Mom, in her grief-stricken kindness, let him in. Matt sat on our living room couch like he belonged there. Talked about Lisa like he knew her better than we ever did. He talked about her laugh, her favorite pancakes, the way she liked to double knot her hiking boots. Dad sat silently in the armchair, jaw locked, staring at nothing. When Matt finally left, I turned to Mom. "Why did you let him in?" She sighed. "He's grieving too." But I didn't believe that. I don't think he came to grieve. I think he came to linger. It didn't stop there. Matt started appearing more often. A family barbecue in June. He showed up with lemonade. 4th of July. He brought sparklers. Thanksgiving. He had a pumpkin pie Lisa used to bake. "Your mom said it was okay," he'd explain. "I thought Lisa would have wanted me here. And my parents, they let him in." Again and again. I watched him sit at our table, smile too long. Watch too closely.
He's harmless, Mom said. Just lonely.
But that wasn't what I saw. I saw something darker. Last Christmas, I was in the kitchen, away from the noise. Matt followed me in. He leaned against the counter, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the window like he was watching something beyond it. She was different with me, he said. His voice was soft, like the hum of a refrigerator. Too quiet, too calm. I tensed. What do you mean? He smiled. That same smile, thin and distant. She told me things she didn't tell anyone else. Like what? His smile widened, like how she wasn't afraid to die. That night, I pulled out Lisa's journals. She'd always written everything down. Little notes, song lyrics, grocery lists. Her thoughts were scattered across pages like fallen leaves. Most entries were warm, ordinary. But then, I found one. Short, scribbled, uneven handwriting. I think Matt's been following me. He won't stop texting. Keep saying he knows something. I don't. I'm starting to feel like I can't shake him. I brought it to Mom, hoping it would finally click. But she barely looked up from the dishes. Lisa was dramatic sometimes, she said. I'm sure it's nothing. A few nights later, I saw Matt's car, parked down the street, lights off, engine idling, just sitting there, watching. I'd seen it before, but told myself it was coincidence. Not this time. Last week was Dad's birthday. Just a quiet evening cake. Wine. Candles. Old music. Matt showed up holding a wrapped book. It's something Lisa would have bought, he said. It was a coffee table book. Hiking trails in the Pacific Northwest. Lisa's favorite dream. I asked him to step outside. And for the first time in months, I didn't pretend. What are you doing here? He looked unbothered. Calm, like I'd asked him what time it was. Paying my respects. Lisa wanted nothing to do with you. Why can't you let her go? His eyes darkened, just slightly. His voice lowered. She told you that? Yes. He stepped closer, close enough that I could see his breath. She told me a lot of things too, things she didn't tell anyone else. Then he leaned in, just enough to whisper. I was there, you know, on the trail. My heart stilled. What? He smiled again. That cold, waxy smile. She didn't fall. She looked me in the eyes and asked me to let her go. I stepped back. You're lying. He tilted his head. Am I? Then softly. If she slipped, why didn't she scream? I called the police that night. Told them everything. The stalking. The journal. The confession. They visited his apartment the next morning, but it was empty. No clothes. No furniture. No trace. Like he'd never lived there at all. That was 7 days ago. I haven't told my parents what he said. I'm not sure they'd believe me. Every night, I check the locks. Every night, I sit up in bed with my phone gripped tight, waiting, listening. Last night, I couldn't sleep. I found myself flipping through Lisa's journals again, searching for, I don't know, something, some sign I missed. I reached the final page. It had always been blank. But this time, there was writing. A single line, jagged and dark, as if carved into the paper. He's not watching. He's inside. I don't know what woke me. A shift in the air. A breath. A silence too complete. I sat up. The room was still. Too still. My phone was cold in my hand. And across the room, on the edge of shadow and lamplight, the closet door was cracked, just slightly. I didn't leave it like that. I didn't. My breath caught. My heart pounded. Then, a whisper. Not words. Just sound. Low, close, like something waiting. Outro. They say grief leaves a door open, that it lingers in the quiet places, in shadows, in pages, in the spaces behind the glass. But Lisa's gone. And Matt never really left. He's not grieving, he's waiting. This next story comes from a shadowed place, the island that forgot us. It was the kind of rule that didn't need to be said aloud, the kind that lived in silences, in glances, in the way people stiffened when the wind blew from the east. We were never to speak of the island across the water. No one said why. No one told us what had happened there. But everyone behaved as if the land itself had made a pact with our village. A quiet agreement. Leave it be, and it will leave you alone. It sat half a mile off our shore, always visible, always still. You could see it from the cliffs, or the goat pastures, or the fishing docks. So close, you could row to it in an hour. But no one did, and no one ever talked about why. When I was 7, I asked my mother if people lived there. She didn't scold me. She simply took my hand and led me inside. Not afraid, not angry, just like she was, hiding me from a thought. My grandfather, a quiet man, with more stories than teeth, once answered no when I asked if he'd ever been there. Then he added, never ask again. And he meant it. There were no fences on our island, just boundaries, old ones, unspoken, unwritten, stronger than iron. Still, we were children. Jonah, Sam, Eli, Nathan, and boys who believed ourselves brave, because we had never yet learned what fear truly was. We stole bread, built slingshots, chased goats, and dared each other to knock on doors that should have been left alone. We were loud, we were restless, and we were always watching that island. Not openly, not together, but always. From the fields, from the trees, from the edge of the sea when no one else was around. It watched us too. I felt it. It was Jonah who broke the silence. We were behind the storehouse, chewing stolen apples and dried fish, when he said casually, I think we should go. Just like that. None of us laughed. No one asked where. We all knew. It had been building for years. The quiet itch under our skin. The space in our minds we couldn't fill. Sam grinned. 2 mornings. Before sunup. Jonah nodded. We didn't shake hands or make a pact. The silence was enough. We met before dawn, the air still damp with night, the world not fully awake. No birdsong, no wind, just the soft hush of oars slipping into water. We took a skiff from the abandoned end of the dock. It wasn't in great shape, but it floated. That was all we needed. As we rowed, the island grew, not just in size but in presence. The closer we got, the heavier the air felt. The fog thickened behind us. Our home disappeared into it. I glanced back once, and felt like I was remembering something from long ago instead of leaving it now. Sam whispered, fins. We saw them. 5 shadows beneath the surface, moving slowly, silently. Jonah said they were black tips. We rowed faster, and then the skiff hit something hard. The boat lurched. Water poured in. We jumped, splashing, kicking, clawing toward shore. Something brushed my leg on the way. I never looked. We landed coughing, gasping, bleeding at the elbows. But we were alive. 5 of us. No bags, no compass, no food, no way back. Just us and the island. This is the same beach, Sam said softly. And it was almost the same crooked tree, the same black rocks, the same slope into the trees. But not quite. Familiar, but not. Like we'd stepped into a painting of our home, drawn from memory by someone who hadn't been there in years. We followed a path that wasn't there before, into the woods. The trees weren't wrong, but they weren't right either. Branches bent the wrong way. The bark felt like damp cloth. The air grew warm and thick. And then we saw her. She stood in the grass above us, tall, still, watching. Her posture was almost human, like something imitating a person from the outside. Her arms hung too straight. Her dress clung strangely, and everything around her moved, except her. Then she smiled, but it was backwards. Her mouth curved down where it should have gone up, but her eyes smiled correctly. Warm, kind, gentle. The kind of smile that makes your bones feel cold. She raised her arm, pointed, not at us, over us. We turned and saw them. 5 shadows in the trees, not hidden, just waiting. They looked like us, but mirrored. Jonah's twin wore his shirt backwards. Sam's reflection stood with the wrong arm crossed. Nathan's double smiled just a little too wide. They didn't move, just stared. We backed away, carefully. Then the woman tilted her head forward. Only her head, her neck stretched like it had no bones. Her smile didn't change. Her eyes never blinked. And then she screamed. It was a scream made of rust and water pressure. Like the world itself was being ripped in half. We dropped, hands over ears, teeth aching, hearts pounding, and then, silence. We looked up. They were gone. We moved on. Not because we wanted to, but because we couldn't stay there. The woods twisted. The path vanished. The sky dimmed. Until we found the house. It looked like Nathan's house. Same slope, same porch, same colors. But wrong. Mirrored, reversed. The door was open. We went in. It smelled like old wood and forgotten time. Photographs lined the walls. Nathan's family, but reversed. Furniture in the wrong place. Clocks ticking half a beat slow. Paintings we recognized, except the rivers ran backwards. Then Nathan was gone. We searched, upstairs, downstairs, outside. He wasn't there. Until he was. He stepped out of the house calmly, smiling too quickly, hands too still. I was upstairs, but we'd been upstairs. Every room, every stair. Something wasn't right. We kept moving. The forest darkened. The trees bent lower. Then we heard a voice, croaking, cracking, trying to speak. We ran, but Eli didn't make it. She stepped from the trees, cradling him. He was screaming, thrashing, fighting. She smiled that same wrong smile. Her eyes, kind, as if she loved him, as if she was proud. She held him tighter, and he screamed until he couldn't, until something inside him broke, until he stopped moving. We ran, found a boat. Nathan came with us, but something in his smile had changed. The villagers were waiting. They helped us ashore. They didn't ask where Eli was. They already knew. Nathan's mother hugged him, then looked into his face and stepped back. The others came forward. They took Nathan by the arms, led him to the sea. No words, no struggle. They held him under until the waves stopped moving. We never went back, and no one ever spoke of it again. Not the island, not Eli, not Nathan. As if forgetting was the last part of the rule. Let's move on to another tale, just as eerie. The Ones Who Cry Outside. Rewrite of every night a different person walks down the street and screams for help. We aren't allowed to help them. Soft, immersive tone. Whispered dread, drawn out like a slow exhale. It felt too quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you stop halfway through unpacking just to listen. Not because you heard something, but because you did. Stillness pressed itself into the apartment like thick velvet. No creaking pipes. No neighbors moving furniture upstairs. Just the lazy whirl of the ceiling fan and the far-off hum of a street lamp flickering somewhere beyond the curtains. I told myself it was just exhaustion. Moving in had taken more out of me than I expected. My arms were sore from lifting boxes alone, and a dull throb had settled behind my eyes. The rent was too low for the area. I knew that, but I was desperate. And desperation makes you blind to certain warning signs, like silence that feels too empty, or a landlord who avoids eye contact. Her fingers stained yellow with ash, her voice so thin it felt like it might crack if she said too much. I signed anyway. The keys were cold in my palm when she dropped them in, her hand barely brushing mine. I asked no questions. And now, here I was. Transition. I didn't expect company. I didn't even think anyone knew I'd moved in yet. So when the knock came, a soft, deliberate tap against the half-open door, I nearly jumped out of my skin. The ones who cry outside. Part 2. The visitors. The rules. The knock came again, softer this time. I blinked, sat up slowly, and remembered with a twist of embarrassment that I'd left the door wide open. Rookie mistake. I should have known better. In college, we were told never to leave your door open unless you were ready to make friends. I wasn't. Two girls stood there in the doorway. One leaned on the frame with a grin, her short black hair unevenly chopped like she'd done it herself at midnight. The other stood further back, tugging absently at her long red braids. She clutched a slightly crumpled pack of cigarettes in one hand, watching me with quiet curiosity. "Hey," said the girl with the braids, her voice a husky whisper. "You just move in?" I nodded slowly, rubbing my face with both palms.
Yeah,
"About 5 seconds ago." "Cool." The other girl walked in like she owned the place, trailing her fingers across my dusty desk. She picked up a small ceramic duck from a half-unpacked box and held it to her face. "Grandma's," I muttered. "She used to collect them." "Cute," she said softly, still examining it. There was no invitation. They just entered. My exhaustion told me to be annoyed, but something about them felt too familiar to resist. Like I was stepping into a memory I didn't have. The one with the braids looked around slowly. "Has anyone told you yet, Jana?" The other girl sighed. "Maybe give her a second to breathe. She needs to know," Jana said flatly. "Yeah, but maybe ask her name first." "Arden," I offered before they could argue further. "It's Arden." Jana smiled faintly and sat beside me on the mattress, kicking off her shoes like we were already old friends. "There are rules," she said, "and you need to know them before tonight." I blinked at her. Rules? My lease was standard, or at least I assumed it was. I hadn't exactly read it closely. My landlord was a skeleton of a woman with lips like paper, her voice dry as ash. When she handed it over, I just signed. The rent was too good to risk asking questions. "What rules?" I asked, frowning. "Every night," Jana said, lowering her voice, "someone walks down the street, a different person every time. They scream, cry, beg. They ask for help." My brows drew together. "And you don't help them." I let out a small breath, unsure if they were joking. But their faces stayed soft, serious. "It sounds ridiculous, I know," the black-haired girl added. "But you'll see. It's always someone different. And it's always the same. No matter how real it feels, no matter what they say, You do not help. Why? I asked, blinking slowly. They didn't answer. Just then, Gianna stood, brushing invisible dust from her jeans. We'll show you, she said. Tonight. Before I could say anything, they were already walking out. Their voices melted together in the hallway, soft and unreadable. I closed the door gently behind them and locked it. The Ones Who Cry Outside, Part 3. The first night they returned just after dusk. Gianna knocked softly, once, then let herself in. Behind her came May, the quiet one, along with two boys I hadn't met before. One of them, tall and lean in a black t-shirt, wore a silver heart-shaped locket around his neck that caught the glow of my lamp. He smiled at me in a way that felt both kind and distant. Will, he said, offering his name. The other boy, round-faced with nervous eyes and a buzz cut, gave a small wave. Mateo. Gianna brought a half-finished bottle of wine. She placed it gently on the floor and sat beside the window like she'd done this before. Me lingered near the doorway, then joined us slowly. They said nothing about why they were there, and I didn't ask. Some part of me already knew. We sat in a quiet semicircle, on the floor. Someone passed the wine. I took a sip. It tasted like bitter cherry and old wood. Outside, the streetlights blinked on one by one, painting the windows in soft gold. Does it happen at the same time every night? I finally asked. Will shook his head. Never twice at the same hour, I said softly. Sometimes it's late, sometimes before dinner. It's never predictable, Mateo added, his voice barely above a breath. I opened my mouth to respond when every phone in the room buzzed at once. A harsh mechanical tone echoed through the space, overlapping in a discordant alarm. My heart jumped. I fumbled for my phone, the screen glowing in my palm. Do not interfere. A silence fell over the room. Will was suddenly still like a statue, eyes glassy. Gianna stubbed out her cigarette on the edge of the windowsill, her shoulders tight with tension. Even May shifted back from the glass, retreating into herself. What is this? I whispered, but no one answered. Outside, it began. At first it was faint, like the wind playing tricks on your ears. Then came the sound. A voice, shaky, strained, unraveling at the edges. Help, please, can someone help me? I turned toward the window slowly, as if my body were being moved by strings. I leaned just close enough to see out. Beneath the flickering halo of the street lamp stood a man, or what remained of one. His hospital gown clung to him like paper. His skin was pale and bruised beneath the yellow light. His legs barely held him upright as he staggered from door to door. Blood. It dripped behind him in a slow trail, like a message written in red ink. I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Then he stopped, right beneath our window. His head tilted upward. I couldn't see his eyes, but I felt them, heavy, direct, like they were inside my chest. Help me, he whispered. Then he screamed. It wasn't a human sound. It was high and broken, echoing off the bricks like shattered glass. A sound that should not come from any throat. The others didn't move. My body tensed. I wanted to run, to yell, to do something. But May gently placed her hand on my arm. Her fingers trembled. Don't, she whispered. He's hurt. I choked. We have to. We can't. I looked back down. Now I saw the truth. The blood wasn't from a wound. It was from the stumps where his arms used to be. He swayed slightly, unblinking. Please, help. His screams shattered again, shrill and long and empty. Not pain, not rage, just need. Something bottomless, Something wrong. I couldn't move. May yanked me away from the window. I stumbled, falling hard onto the floor. My breath caught in my throat. "What is that?" I whispered. No one answered. The Ones Who Cry Outside. Part 4. The Birthday and the Return. The days after that night blurred together. I tried to tell myself it hadn't happened. That the man under the streetlight was a trick of the dark, a fever dream born of moving stress and wine. But every evening, just before sunset, I felt it again, that stillness. The silence didn't feel natural. It wasn't peace, it was waiting. I started spending more time with the others. With Jana, whose cigarettes always tasted faintly of cinnamon. With Mateo, who insisted on making playlists for every mood. With Will, though he rarely spoke now, always holding that silver locket, always looking at the window, waiting. Mostly, though, I found myself with Mai. We didn't talk much, not about it anyway. We'd sit together on the stoop, watching neighbors pass by with coffee or strollers. It all looked so normal in the daylight. She'd lean against the rail, smoke curling from her lips, and sometimes she'd hum under her breath. Something soft like a lullaby. I found comfort there, even when the nights were hard. Even when the cries came again. Different voices, different shapes. Sometimes a child, sometimes a man in a torn wedding tuxedo. Sometimes nothing visible at all. Only the voice echoing down the street like it had no mouth. And we never helped, not once. Then came the night of Mai's birthday. They burst into my apartment with cake, crooked letters scrawled in pink icing. "Happy birthday, Mai." Mateo wore a party hat. Jayana brought wine and the world's most off-key kazoo. Mai rolled her eyes, but I saw the soft smile behind them. She didn't like surprises, but she liked us. We danced in the kitchen. We took blurry photos. I watched her blow out the candles, her face lit by flickering light. She looked safe. For a moment, it felt like we'd made our own little world, where the darkness couldn't touch us. Later, we packed into Mateo's car to go out. The bar was loud. Neon lights throbbed against the walls. I hated those places in college, but this time, I stayed. I danced until my legs hurt, laughed until my throat was sore. When the others spilled out onto the sidewalk for a smoke, May stayed behind and tugged me toward the old photo booth near the back. We crammed inside. She hit the button. The flash went off. She turned to me slowly, eyes catching the flicker of light. Her voice was barely a whisper. "You never gave me a birthday present." Before I could answer, she kissed me. Her lips were soft, hesitant. She tasted like strawberry liquor and cigarette smoke. My heart was thudding, but I didn't pull away. It was quiet, warm. For a moment, Will found me near the bar entrance, pushing through the crowd. His face was pale. "Arden," he said, panting. "What time is it?" I blinked, checked my phone. 1:47 a.m. My heart dropped. Will showed me his phone. The screen had his lock screen. A photo of him and a girl with strawberry blonde hair, both laughing, both whole. Then he showed me the time again. "I don't know why it hasn't happened yet," he murmured. "But we need to go." We found the others outside, smoke curling in the air like fog. None of us said it, but we all felt it. The stillness, the waiting. The drive home was silent. Mateo turned down the music. Gianna was unusually quiet. I sat in the back seat, pressed against Mai, her hand resting on my knee. Then it happened. Our phones all buzzed at once. "Do not interfere." The street outside was empty, silent. Our headlights cut through the dark, hazy and useless. Mateo slowed, then stopped. We saw it at the same time. At the far end of the road, a silhouette, small, shaking, barefoot. "Help me," the voice called. It was a girl this time, a white nightgown, streaked in red. The fabric clung to her legs, wet. She limped forward, arms outstretched. "Please, help me," my breath caught. There was something familiar about the way she moved, her shape, the soft blonde hair matted to her cheeks. Will gasped. He leaned forward, pressing a hand to the windshield. "Shannon." Mateo turned. "What did you say?" "That's her," Will whispered. "That's Shannon." "No," Mateo said quickly, voice rising. "No, Will, that's not her. You know it's not." Will's knuckles turned white around the seat. "She's alive. They didn't take her. That's her." "Will." The figure drew closer. We could see her face now, eyes gone, just hollow spaces, like two pits had been carved out of her skull. Blood dripped where tears should have been. She whimpered, then screamed, "Help me." Will reached for the door. Me grabbed my hand. She was trembling. "No." Mateo lunged for the lock. Too late. The door opened with a click. Will stepped out onto the street. The ones who cry outside. Part 5. The last rule broken. Will stepped onto the pavement. The door swung shut behind him with a dull final click. The girl, the one he called Shannon, didn't react at first. She kept stumbling forward, arms out, crying softly. Her face, it didn't make sense. The sockets where her eyes should have been were raw, hollow. Her mouth hung open, red with something I didn't want to understand. Her gown fluttered in the warm night breeze like a funeral shroud. But her voice was unmistakably her. "Help me." Will froze in the middle of the street. I could barely see him through the windshield. The flashing red lights cast him in stuttered shadows. From somewhere behind us, an alarm began to howl. Not like a phone this time. Louder, mechanical, hollow. It wasn't for us. It was for her. She stopped. Her head turned sharply, first left, then right, like an animal sensing something unseen. Her breath hitched. Her arms curled to her chest. And then she backed away. Her mouth twisted into something that might have been fear. That's when I saw the van, black, unmarked, slipping around the corner like a shark's fin through dark water. It didn't stop. Two figures in white stepped out and moved toward her fast, precise. No words, no faces. I looked away. When I glanced back, they were gone. Will was gone. Only silence remained. We didn't speak on the drive home. Mateo kept his eyes on the road. Gianna cried quietly into her coat. May held my hand the entire way. She never let go. When we reached the building, the street lamps flickered once, then held steady. No more cries. Just the stillness, the waiting. That was, I don't know, a week ago? Maybe more. None of us talk about it. Not anymore. Will's apartment was cleared out the next morning. Locks changed. His name vanished from the mailbox. The landlord won't answer our questions. The police wouldn't file a report. And at night, sometimes I still hear his voice, faint, somewhere beneath the window. "Please, I just want to come home." I keep the blinds closed now. I don't look. I don't help. I follow the rules. Another story, carried by the hush of night. I'm a long-haul trucker. Part 1. It started like any other night. The road stretched on in silence, and the hum of the engine kept me company. But somewhere between the trees and the darkness, something changed. I've always liked the quiet. There's something strangely peaceful about driving through the night. Just me, the road, and the low drone of the engine beneath my seat. I used to think of it like floating, drifting across a ribbon of pavement, carved into an ocean of trees and sky. That night was no different. At least, it wasn't supposed to be. I'd been hauling for hours, passing through the kind of country where the world forgets to exist, where the air smells like pine and frost, and the sky feels heavy with things left unsaid. There were no towns for miles, no headlights coming the other way, just the steady rhythm of tires on asphalt, and a kind of stillness that crept in the longer I drove. The radio had turned to static hours ago. My coffee had gone lukewarm, and outside the windshield, there was only darkness, thick, endless darkness. I remember how the trees looked, lined up like sentinels on either side of the highway, unmoving and silent, their shapes barely visible in the wash of my headlights. The dashboard glowed with soft green light, and the warmth inside the cab made it easy to forget how cold the world had grown just beyond the glass. But something was wrong. It wasn't anything loud. Not a bang, not a shriek, not even a flicker of light in the distance. It was just a shape where there shouldn't have been one. Part 2. The sighting pulling over. First hints of the unnatural. It happened gradually, almost like a dream. You don't remember slipping into. One moment, I was watching the white dashed lines flicker by in that soft, endless rhythm. The next, something changed. Not in the road, not in the truck. In me, there was a flicker, just outside the reach of my headlights on the shoulder, right side. A shape, small, upright, still, and then gone. I blinked hard, trying to shake the blur from my vision. The shape had looked wrong. Not a deer, not a coyote, not anything I could easily name. It had been too still, too quiet, too human. I told myself it was nothing. A trick of the light. Shadows playing games again. That's what you tell yourself when you're 10 hours deep on a dead road, and the dark starts whispering around the edges of your eyes. But the feeling didn't leave. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my palms suddenly damp. Something about that shape had carved its way into me. Like a splinter. I couldn't see but couldn't stop feeling. Still, I kept going. A few seconds passed. Then I checked the mirror, and my heart stopped. There it was, standing on the shoulder, lit faintly red by the dying glow of my trailer lights. A child, alone, and completely still. My mouth went dry. It should have disappeared into the dark. It should have been a shadow. But it was still there, watching, waiting. I don't remember making the decision. My body just moved. Muscle memory. Instinct. The brakes hissed like angry breath. The truck slowed. The hazards blinked into the dark like a heartbeat. I reversed slowly, gravel crunching under massive tires, until I saw the shape again, this time just ahead of my passenger side door. Small, barefoot, in thin pajamas. A child, alone, out here. The forest loomed just behind them. A wall of black. A place where light went to die. They didn't seem to notice the truck, or the noise, or me. They just kept walking, slowly, like nothing was wrong. Part 3. The child, the questions and the invitation into the woods. I shut off the engine, and for the first time in hours, silence. No rumble, no static, no noise, just stillness. The kind of stillness that doesn't feel peaceful, but watchful. I rolled down the window, and the cold air slipped in, damp, pine-scented and heavy. "Hey," I called out softly. "Kid, you all right?" No answer. They didn't even flinch. They just kept walking, slowly. Bare feet brushing across the gravel. their thin pajamas barely shifting with each step. There was no panic in their movements, no fear, no recognition of the massive truck just feet away. Just that slow, drifting walk, as if they were somewhere else entirely. My heart thudded against my ribs. Everything about this was wrong. "Where are your parents?" I asked, louder this time. Finally, the child stopped. They turned their head, just a little, not to look at me. No, just enough to show the pale curve of one cheek in my headlights. Their face was smooth, still, blank. Then, a whisper. "Lost." The word barely touched the air, like wind rustling through dry grass. I swallowed. "Okay, that's all right. We can work with lost. Where were you trying to go?" Silence again. Then the child turned, just slightly more. I couldn't see their eyes, couldn't read their expression, but something about the angle of their head, the stillness of their body. It felt like they were waiting, measuring me. "Home," they said. That same empty tone, that same flat whisper. "Where's home?" I asked gently. "Is it nearby?" The child didn't answer. Instead, they raised their hand. Not high, not dramatically. Just enough to point with one small pale finger toward the woods. The forest at the edge of the road looked like a solid black wall. Impenetrable, no path, no flicker of light. Just darkness. "In there," the child said. My fingers curled tightly around the steering wheel. A voice in my head said no. Firm, clear, instinctive. "Are you sure?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's dark, hard to see. Maybe we should wait until morning." The child didn't blink. "It's close. I can almost see it. If you just step out, your light would help." That phrase, "your light would help." It chilled me more than the cold air ever could. I leaned forward slightly. My eyes traced the edge of the woods. Nothing. No glow. No movement. Just shadow. The child didn't move. "Please," they said. The word hung there. Quiet. Careful. They took one step closer to the truck. Close enough now that I could see the rise and fall of their chest. But no shiver. No breath clouding in the cold air. No emotion. Just that same blankness. Something was wrong. Deeply, quietly wrong. Still, I felt it. The pull. The urge to help. The need to not be the person who left a lost child alone in the dark. My hand drifted toward the door handle. And that's when I saw it. Not the child. Behind them. Something else. Part 4. The Tube. The Voice and the Transformation. At first I thought it was a shadow, just a trick of the angle, my headlights bouncing strangely off the trees behind them. But it wasn't that. It was connected, a thick, dark shape, stretching from the small of the child's back, trailing off into the woods like a tether. Long, curved, almost like a cord. No, not like a cord. It was a cord, but it wasn't made of rope or fabric. It didn't reflect light, didn't even seem to exist in the way real things do. It was darker than shadow, a strip of absence, matte and unnatural, like someone had carved a line through reality and forgotten to fill it back in. It pulsed, just once, faintly, and something inside me recoiled. Not my mind, my body. My instincts, that deep, buried part of us that remembers things from before we had words for fear. My breath caught in my throat, and the child spoke again. "Will you help me now?" But the voice was wrong. It was no longer small, no longer human. It was low, resonant, like gravel sliding across metal beneath a frozen lake. The words crawled through the air and settled into my bones, heavy and vibrating. Just come out. Step into the dark. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. I could only stare at that awful black tube curling behind the child like some ancient, monstrous umbilical cord, reaching back into the woods into something waiting just beyond the trees. What is that? I finally whispered, my voice trembling. Behind you? The child's posture shifted, subtle. Not defensive, not surprised, just annoyed. What? They said. But the voice was not theirs. Not really. It echoed. It scraped. It wasn't something shaped for human ears. That thing, I pointed. My hand barely steady. It's connected to you. A long silence followed. And then, the child's face began to change. Not violently, not all at once. It settled. Like clay hardening into something it was never meant to be. The skin tightened over delicate bones. The hollows of the eyes deepened into ink blots. And something moved beneath the skin. The illusion was slipping. The child was a mask. And something old was peeking through. It looked at me. Not with curiosity, but with frustration. And it spoke clearly this time. That awful, grinding voice rising like a storm. Why? It said, voice shaking the air. Humans smarter now. Part 5. The escape in the quiet that follows. That sentence. It should have sounded absurd, strange, even funny maybe. But it wasn't. Not coming from that thing. Not with that voice. Not with that tether of darkness. Pulsing behind it like some forgotten organ still tied to something slumbering in the trees. It wasn't a question. It was a complaint, a lament, a pattern broken. And that made it worse than any threat I've ever heard. I didn't think. I didn't pause. I turned the key. The engine roared to life. A sudden scream of sound that shattered the stillness like glass. For the first time, the thing flinched, just slightly. Its head jerked back. Not startled, not afraid. Just irritated. Like the trap had been sprung too early. I slammed the rig into gear. Gravel spat out under the tires as I pulled onto the road, the massive truck groaning with the effort. I didn't look back. Not at first. Not until the trees began to blur in the side mirror. And then, I saw it. The child-shaped thing, still standing on the shoulder, perfectly still, watching me. The black tether trailing behind it, thick and unmoving, as if rooted in something deep beneath the forest floor. It didn't pursue. It didn't need to. It just watched. And behind it, the woods waited. Not empty, not silent, just waiting. I drove until the sky began to pale, and the static on my radio flickered back to life. When my phone finally buzzed with a signal, I pulled over and emptied my stomach onto the gravel. I couldn't stop shaking, couldn't stop crying. Not from sorrow, from understanding. That thing hadn't just tried to trick me. It had expected me to follow, expected me to open the door, step out, be helpful, and it had been surprised when I didn't. Why are humans smarter now? It wasn't talking to me. Not really. It was remembering something else. Something older. A time when the trick always worked. When someone alone on a dark road would step into the trees without question. Maybe that's what it's always done. Maybe there were others. Maybe those stories about people disappearing from highways weren't just stories. I never told anyone. Who would believe me? I just quit. Found a local job. One that keeps me close to home. Off the long, lonely stretches. And I never drive at night, if I can help it. Because sometimes when the road grows too quiet, and the trees lean too close, I think I see something just at the edge of the light. A small figure, a pale face, and behind it, reaching into the woods, a cord that was never meant to be seen. So if you ever find yourself on one of those forgotten roads, and you see a child by the trees, don't stop. Don't roll down your window. And whatever you do, don't follow them into the dark.